The silent call. The chamber walls pulsed with dying light, casting shadows across Admiral Kelvor's four-chambered face. His crystalline eyes reflected the holographic display showing system after system winking out like extinguished candles. The Avaran Empire, which had stood for 12,000 cycles, was collapsing. "Another colony lost," whispered his aide, her voice breaking with static through the damaged communications array. "Torvin Prime. 3 billion souls. Gone in less than a sun turn." Kelvor's hands trembled as he gripped the console. The Scourge had appeared from the void 2 cycles ago, massive bioships that consumed everything. They didn't conquer or negotiate. They devoured. His empire's greatest weapons had failed. Their allies had already fallen. Now, only pride remained, and pride was a luxury the dying couldn't afford. "Send the signal," he commanded. "Broadcast it across all frequencies. Every language, every known species. Admiral, the High Council forbids." "The High Council is dead," Kelvor interrupted, his tone flat. "I watched their ships burn this morning. Send it. Let the galaxy know we're begging." 70 light-years away, Captain Mira Vasquez sat in the cramped communications hub of Outpost Severin, nursing cold coffee and reviewing supply manifests. Earth's newest colony was barely 3 years old, built on a moon orbiting a gas giant that the first explorers had optimistically named Prosperity. So far, prosperity meant recycled air, synthetic food, and boredom. "Captain, you need to hear this," called Lieutenant Chen from his station. His usual calm replaced by urgency. The signal was broken, desperate, translated through a dozen linguistic filters. But the message was unmistakable. An empire was dying. An enemy unlike anything humanity had encountered was destroying civilizations that had existed for millennia. They were begging for help. "This could be a trap," Chen suggested. "We've been avoiding contact for decades. Earth's policy is clear. Observe, don't engage." Vasquez stared at the waveform display. She thought of her grandmother's stories about the intervention wars when humanity had nearly destroyed itself. They'd learned isolation, built walls around their solar system, and sworn never to repeat their mistakes. But this wasn't about conquest or ideology. This was extinction. "Contact Dr. Reeves," Vasquez ordered. "If we're going to convince Earth to break isolation, we'll need a xenobiologist who can verify this threat." Dr. Nina Reeves arrived within the hour, her auburn hair hastily tied back, her tablet already showing preliminary analysis. She'd spent 15 years studying theoretical alien civilizations. Finally, she had proof they existed and proof they were dying. "The linguistic patterns are genuine," Nina said, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. "Multiple species contributing to this message." The desperation in the vocal harmonics. "Captain, this is real. And whatever's attacking them doesn't care about diplomacy." Vasquez made her decision. She opened a secure channel to Earth's Defense Council, knowing she was about to ignite a political firestorm. But as she crafted her message, she remembered something her academy instructor had said. "Humanity survived because we knew when to fight and when to help. Sometimes they're the same thing." "This is Captain Mira Vasquez of Outpost Severin. I'm requesting emergency authorization for first contact protocols and military deployment. We've received a distress signal from an alien civilization facing extinction. I'm recommending immediate intervention." The response took 6 hours. When it came, it was brief. "Authorization granted. Assemble your team. Humanity is going to war." The meeting of worlds. The neutral space station hung between stars like a pearl in the void. Commander Torrin Graves stood beside Captain Vasquez, his jaw tight as the airlock cycled open. Behind them, diplomat Sienna Cross adjusted her translation collar, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was humanity's first face-to-face contact with an alien species, and the weight of history pressed down on her shoulders. The Avaran delegation emerged like living sculptures. Ambassador Kelthar led them, his towering frame covered in bioluminescent scales that shifted through shades of deep blue and violet. His eyes, 3 of them, arranged in a triangle across his face, fixed on the human delegation with an intensity that made Sienna's breath catch. "You came," Kelthar said, his voice resonating through the translation device. "We did not believe you would." Vasquez stepped forward, offering her hand in the ancient human gesture of peace. Kelthar studied it for a moment before extending his own, slender fingers with an extra joint wrapping carefully around hers. The contact sent a shock of understanding between them. Two species, meeting for the first time, while death stalked the stars. "Tell us about the scourge," Vasquez said, releasing his hand. The briefing room became a theater of horrors. Holographic displays showed worlds stripped to bedrock, fleets of bioships that moved like schools of predatory fish, and death counts that numbered in the trillions. Torin's expression grew darker with each image, his tactical mind already calculating odds and finding them impossible. "They adapt to every weapon we use," Kelthar explained, standing close enough to Sienna that she could smell something like ozone and flowers mixed together. "Conventional warfare fails. Energy weapons are absorbed. Kinetic strikes are deflected. They learn from every engagement." "Then stop being conventional," Torin said bluntly. "You're fighting them like a traditional military. That's why you're losing." The Avaran military advisors bristled, their scales flashing angry reds. But Kelthar raised a hand, silencing them. His central eye remained fixed on Sienna, who had been taking notes with an intensity that surprised her. She looked up, caught his gaze, and felt something shift in the air between them. "Your species has proposals?" Kelthar asked, directing his question to her rather than the military officers. Sienna glanced at Vasquez, who nodded. "We've studied your tactical reports. You attack with overwhelming force, expecting victory through superior numbers and technology. But the Scourge evolved, or were designed, to counter exactly that approach. Humanity." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "We learned warfare differently. We learned it from fighting ourselves." She activated her own display, showing historical battles from Earth. Guerrilla tactics, asymmetric warfare, strategies born from desperation and creativity rather than technological superiority. The Avarans watched in fascinated horror as humans demonstrated their talent for organized chaos. "You fight like prey pretending to be predators," one Avaran general growled. "This is madness, not strategy." "No," Kelthar said softly, his eyes still on Sienna. "This is survival. This is what species do when they have no choice but to win or die." He turned to Vasquez. "We accept your help. But know this, Captain. If your methods fail, there will be nothing left to save." "Then we better not fail," Vasquez replied. As the formal meeting concluded, Kelthar approached Sienna near the viewport. The station's rotation had brought them into view of a nebula that painted the darkness in shades of crimson and gold. "You understand loss," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Sienna nodded, thinking of Earth's own near-extinction events. "We understand what it means to face the end and refuse to accept it." His hand brushed hers. Accidentally or intentionally, she couldn't tell. "Then perhaps together, we can teach the Scourge what it means to face humanity and the Avaran Empire united." In that moment, standing between stars with annihilation approaching, Sienna felt the weight of two civilizations' hopes settling on her shoulders. But she also felt something else, a connection forming across the gulf of species and culture, fragile as starlight but just as real. Bonds forged in fire. The training grounds of Fleet Base, Prometheus thrummed with energy as human and Avaran forces attempted their first joint exercise. Commander Torin Graves watched from the tactical platform as his pilots tried to synchronize with Avaran wingmen, the result resembling a collision more than coordination. "This is impossible," Engineer Rindal declared, his scales flashing frustrated orange. He stood barely 3 meters from Torin, their cultural differences as vast as the space between their homeworlds. "Your pilots fly like intoxicated insects. No formation discipline, no respect for tactical doctrine." Torin's laugh was sharp. "That's because doctrine gets you killed against the Scourge. My pilots fly like they're trying to survive, not impress an academy board. Chaos is not strategy. Neither is being predictable." Their argument drew Vasquez's attention from across the hangar. She'd been expecting friction, but the intensity between Torin and Rindal was either going to forge an unbreakable alliance or tear their combined forces apart. She decided to let them work it out. Sometimes the best solutions came from conflict. Meanwhile, in the command center's upper level, Sienna and Kelthar had fallen into a routine of late-night strategy sessions. What had started as tactical planning had evolved into something neither had anticipated. They sat close now, sharing a viewport that looked out on the practice field, their different physiologies no longer seeming strange but simply different. Your people express affection through physical contact, Kelthar observed, watching human couples embrace between training runs. For Averans, we share bioluminescent patterns. A dance of light across our scales. Sienna smiled, her fingers tracing patterns on her tablet. Show me? He hesitated, then allowed his scales to shimmer, waves of deep blue and silver cascading across his skin in mesmerizing rhythms. It was beautiful and intimate, a language of light she was only beginning to understand. It means trust, he translated softly, and something your people might call affection. Her hand moved to his arm, feeling the warmth beneath the scales. We're not so different, are we? Different enough to be interesting, he replied, his voice carrying a warmth that transcended translation. Similar enough to understand. The moment shattered when alarms shrieked across the base. Scourge scouts had been detected at the system's edge. 3 bioships, smaller than the main fleet but deadly enough to destroy the station. All units launch, Vasquez commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. Torin and Rindahl raced to the hangar, their argument forgotten. Your way or mine? Torin asked as they reached their respective fighters. Rindahl's scales pulsed with determination. Both, my precision, your madness, together. The battle was brief and brutal. The Scourge ships moved like living things, their organic weapons spitting corrosive plasma. The Averan squadrons engaged with textbook formations while human pilots darted through the chaos like angry hornets. Initially it was a disaster, until Torin and Rindahl synchronized their approaches. Human fighters, pattern Delta 7, Rindahl broadcast. Create chaos in Sector 3. Averan wings, hold formation and channel them toward the debris field, Torin added. The Scourge couldn't adapt fast enough. They expected either chaotic human tactics or rigid Averan strategy, not both simultaneously. When the 3rd bioship tried to retreat, Rindahl made a split-second decision. His ship's core was damaged, venting atmosphere, but he had enough power for one final maneuver. Rindahl, pull back, Torin shouted over the comm. There's no time, human. Tell them, the Averan's voice steadied. Tell them we learned to dance together. His ship slammed into the fleeing bioship's propulsion system, the explosion lighting up space like a newborn star. The Scourge vessel tumbled into the gas giant's gravity well, destruction guaranteed. The silence that followed was deafening. Torin brought his fighter back to the hangar, his hands shaking on the controls. He'd known Rindahl for 3 weeks. They'd argued every day, and now grief hit him like a physical blow, for a friend he'd barely had time to know. Sienna found Kelthar in the observation deck, his scales dark with mourning. She didn't speak, just stood beside him, her hand finding his. Their fingers intertwined, human and Averan, warm flesh and scaled strength. He believed we could win, Kelthar said finally. He died believing it. Then we make sure he was right, Sienna replied, squeezing his hand gently. In the hangar, Vasquez gathered her forces, human and Averan standing together now, united by sacrifice. They're testing us, she told them. The Scourge wanted to see what we're capable of. So let's show them. Let's show them what happens when humanity and the Averan Empire decide to stop dying and start fighting back. The roar of approval that followed echoed through the station, a promise of retribution to come. The storm breaks. The threshold gate hung in space like a massive ring of ancient metal, a hyperspace nexus connecting 17 systems. Whoever controlled it controlled the sector. The Scourge knew this, and they were coming with everything they had. Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, humanity's flagship, watching the sensors light up with enemy contacts. Hundreds of them, perhaps thousands. Fleet status? She asked, her voice steady despite the ice in her veins. 83 human vessels ready. 147 Averan ships holding position around the gate, Torin reported from Tactical. His eyes still carried shadows from Rindahl's death, but his hands were rock steady on the weapons console. They're bringing the entire Hive fleet, Captain. We're outnumbered 15-1. Good, Vasquez said, surprising everyone on the bridge. The more they commit here, the fewer they have for everywhere else. This is where we break them. Kelthar's face appeared on the view screen from the Averan command carrier Star of Kelvin. His scales showed determination patterns that Sienna had taught Vasquez to read. The gate is our last stand, Captain. If we fail here, the core worlds are exposed. My people are ready to die. Then let's make sure dying isn't necessary, Vasquez replied. Commander Graves, initiate Pattern Omega. The human fleet scattered like startled birds, their formation dissolving into apparent chaos. The Avaran commanders watched in horror as their carefully planned defensive positions collapsed. But Kelthar, standing beside Sienna on his flagship, understood. This was the lesson they'd been teaching each other: controlled chaos against rigid adaptation. The Scourge fleet advanced, their bioships pulsing with organic weapons. They'd studied previous battles, learned to counter both human unpredictability and Avaran precision. But they'd never faced both species working as one organism, different and synchronized. Now, Torin commanded, human fighters erupted from hiding positions within the gate's superstructure, hitting the Scourge flanks with kinetic missiles, primitive weapons the enemy had stopped defending against because no advanced species used them anymore. While the Scourge adapted, Avaran energy lances struck from above. Their targeting solutions provided by human tactical computers that calculated faster than biological minds. General Vortex, the Scourge hive mind controlling the assault, screamed across all frequencies, a sound like tearing metal and dying stars. They were being hurt, actually damaged by these impossible allies. The general ordered the main hive ship forward, a behemoth 3 kilometers long that housed the consciousness directing the entire fleet. That's the target, Sienna said, her analysis appearing on all allied screens simultaneously. I've been studying their communications. Vortex isn't just commanding, they're physically connected to every ship. Sever that connection, and the fleet loses coordination. Easier said than done, Torin muttered, watching the hive ship's shields repel everything thrown at them. That thing's defended by 50 escort vessels and has adaptive shielding that makes our weapons useless after the first hit. Kelthar's scales pulsed with sudden understanding. Then we don't hit it twice with the same weapon. Every ship, every weapon, one strike only. Rotate targeting. Don't let it adapt. The Allied fleet reformed, creating a gauntlet of fire. Each ship fired once. Missiles, lasers, plasma cannons, railguns, weapons from primitive to advanced, then peeled away before the Scourge could target them. The hive ship's shields flickered, unable to adapt to the constant variation in attack. But Vortex was learning. The escort ships began mimicking the tactic, spreading out to protect their commander. The battle was turning into a stalemate, ships dying on both sides while the hive ship crawled closer to the gate. On the Star of Kelvin, Kelthar made a decision that would haunt him forever. Sienna, there's something I haven't told the Council. Our ship carries an ancient weapon, a singularity bomb from the wars before your species reached the stars. It's been forbidden for 6,000 cycles because it tears space itself apart. Sienna stared at him, understanding dawning in her eyes. How close do you need to be? Too close. It requires manual detonation, and the ship carrying it can't escape the event horizon. His scales shifted through colors of regret and determination. But it will destroy that hive ship and everything around it. It will save millions. No, Sienna said firmly, her hand gripping his arm. There has to be another way. I didn't come this far across the galaxy to watch you die. Their eyes met. Human and Avaran, different species bound by something that transcended biology. In that moment, Kelthar realized something that his people's poets had written about, but he'd never truly understood. Love wasn't limited by the shape of a body or the color of skin. It existed in the space between souls, in the choice to see beyond difference. I'm not dying today, he told her, his voice carrying absolute conviction. We're going to do something impossibly stupid instead. Contact Captain Vasquez. Tell her we're going to ram that hive ship, but we're not detonating until we're through its shields. And tell Torin to have his fastest ship standing by for emergency extraction. The next 5 minutes were chaos incarnate. The Star of Kelvin accelerated toward the hive ship, every weapon firing to clear a path. The Scourge focused all their fire on the approaching carrier, but Avaran's shields, ancient and powerful, held just long enough. The ship's prow smashed through the adaptive barriers, penetrating deep into the hive ship's organic hull. Bomb is armed, Kelthar shouted. All hands, evacuate now! But the explosion came early. One of the Scourge escort ships had sacrificed itself, crashing into the carrier's reactor core. The detonation timer jumped from 30 seconds to 3. Sienna grabbed Kelthar, pulling him toward the emergency pods even as the deck buckled beneath them. They tumbled into a pod with 6 Avaran crew members just as the bomb detonated. Reality screamed, Space folded, and then everything went white. When Torin's rescue ship found the pod 17 minutes later, it was spinning in the debris field of what had been the Scourge Hive fleet. The explosion had worked. Vortex and 300 bioships were gone, torn apart by a wound in space-time itself. Kelthar woke in the medical bay to find Sienna beside him, her hand wrapped around his. Her face was cut and bruised, but she was smiling. "We won," she whispered. "You brilliant suicidal fool." "We actually won." His scales rippled with joy and exhaustion. "Together." "We won together." Outside the medical bay, Vasquez stood beside Torin, watching the survivors of both species helping each other through the corridors. The battle had cost them 40 ships and thousands of lives. But they'd proven something crucial. The Scourge could be beaten. "What's next?" Torin asked. Vasquez's smile was cold and full of promise. "Now we stop running. Now we hunt." Retribution's dawn. The Scourge Central Hive existed in a region of space where 3 nebulas collided, creating a soup of radiation and gravitational chaos that made conventional navigation impossible. It was perfect cover for a species that had terrorized the galaxy for 2 cycles. The massive organic structure pulsed at the center like a diseased heart, tendrils of bioships extending outward like arteries, feeding it with the consumed matter of 100 dead worlds. Vasquez stood before the assembled war council, human and Averin commanders filling the holographic space. 3 months had passed since the Threshold Gate victory. 3 months of hit-and-run attacks, of teaching the Scourge to fear the shadows where humanity and their allies waited. Now they were ready for the final strike. "Intelligence confirms this is their home nest," Sienna reported, her hand unconsciously finding Kelthar's as she spoke. Their relationship had become common knowledge throughout the fleet, a symbol of the Alliance's strength. Destroy this, and the Scourge lose their ability to coordinate across the galaxy. The remaining hives will fight, but without direction. The radiation makes our sensors useless, Torin added, his tactical display showing dozens of potential approach vectors. "We'll be flying blind until we're right on top of them. Perfect conditions for an ambush. Then we give them what they expect," Vasquez said. "A direct assault. Overwhelming force. Everything they've learned to predict from the Averin Empire's historical tactics." The Averin commanders shifted uncomfortably. Admiral Kelvor, who had joined the fleet after his homeworld's evacuation, spoke up. "Captain, those tactics failed before. Why would they work now?" "Because this time they're bait," Vasquez replied, her smile sharp. "The Averin fleet goes in loud and obvious. The Scourge will commit everything to stop you, expecting to crush another frontal assault. Meanwhile, human forces slip through the radiation using primitive visual navigation and magnetic guidance. We learned to fly through worse during Earth's Arctic campaigns. While they're engaged with us, you strike the heart." Kelthar understood, his scales showing approval patterns. "But the Averin fleet will take massive casualties, drawing their attention." "Not if your pilots are as good as Rindal believed they were," Torin said softly. "You hold long enough for us to plant quantum charges at the hive's core structure. When they blow, we all get out together. No one gets left behind this time." The plan was insane. It relied on perfect timing, incredible piloting, and more luck than any sane military commander would pray for. But sanity had never been humanity's strong suit, and the Averins had learned to match their madness with courage. 20 hours later, the combined fleet dropped from hyperspace at the nebula's edge. The Averin formation was textbook perfect, carriers surrounded by destroyer screens, fighter wings in parade formation, every ship exactly where Doctrine said it should be. It was beautiful, professional, and exactly what the Scourge had learned to destroy. The trap sprang immediately. Bioships erupted from the nebula by the thousands, their organic weapons lighting up the darkness like angry stars. The Averin fleet engaged, their shields flaring under the assault while they maintained formation with suicidal discipline. They were a hammer drawing the Scourge out, exposing the hive. "Human strike force, you are clear," Kelvor transmitted, his voice calm despite the chaos surrounding his ship. "Make it count. Make Rindal proud." Torin led 15 stealth corvettes into the radiation soup, flying by visual markers and magnetic resonance. The human pilots weren't enhanced, weren't super soldiers from science fiction. They were simply very, very good at fighting when everything was falling apart. Behind them, shuttles carried the quantum charges, weapons that would rip through dimensional barriers if placed correctly. Sienna and Kelthar rode with Vasquez on the Indomitable, coordinating the assault from just outside the nebula. Their fingers were intertwined, both knowing they were orchestrating battles that would leave thousands dead. The weight of command had brought them together, two souls sharing the burden of impossible decisions. Torrens reached the hive structure, Vasquez reported. Planning charges now. Inside the hive, Torren and his team worked in near-total darkness, the only light coming from their helmet lamps and the sickly bioluminescence of the Scourge structure. The walls were alive, pulsing with organic movement. Every few seconds, they heard sounds that suggested the hive was aware of their presence. Charges set, Torren transmitted. Detonation in 5 minutes. All ships, begin extraction. The Everin fleet executed a fighting retreat with beautiful precision, each ship covering its neighbors as they pulled back from the swarm. But the Scourge had realized the deception. A massive surge of bioships broke off from the main engagement, racing to intercept the human extraction route. "They're going to catch us," Torren said flatly, watching his sensors light up with enemy contacts. "No, they're not," Kelthar said suddenly. He turned to Sienna, his scales showing every color of love and regret at once. "Remember when I told you I wasn't dying today? I lied." Before anyone could stop him, Kelthar initiated an emergency transport, materializing on the bridge of the Star of Kelvin's sister ship, the Dawn's Promise. The carrier had been designated as the rear guard, its shields already failing under concentrated fire. "Kelthar, no," Sienna screamed, but he was already cutting the communication link. The ambassador spoke to his crew in the ancient battle language of his people, words that hadn't been used in 6,000 cycles. They responded with resignation and pride. The Dawn's Promise turned to face the approaching Scourge swarm, positioning itself between the human strike force and annihilation. "Tell her," Kelthar transmitted to Vasquez on a private channel. "Tell Sienna that her people taught mine something we'd forgotten. They taught us that survival isn't enough. Sometimes you have to fight for what matters more than your own life." His ship's weapons blazed with everything they had left. The Scourge swarm crashed against the carrier like a wave against a cliff, and the Dawn's Promise held long enough. The quantum charges detonated in a cascade of dimensional tears. The Scourge hive structure collapsed in on itself, reality screaming as the organic monstrosity was torn from the universe. The shockwave caught the bioship swarm, disintegrating them in seconds. When the sensors cleared, the Dawn's Promise was gone. So was Kelthar. The victory celebration felt hollow to Sienna. They'd won. The Scourge were broken, their remaining hives scattered and fighting each other without central coordination. The galaxy was saved, but she'd paid a price measured in more than tactics and strategy. She stood alone in the observation deck when Vasquez found her 3 days after the battle. The captain sat beside her in comfortable silence, watching the stars that now burned safely without threat of extinction. "He sent you something," Vasquez said finally, handing Sienna a data chip. "He recorded it before the transport. Asked me to give it to you after." Sienna's hands shook as she inserted the chip. Kelthar's face appeared, his scales showing every color she'd learned meant love in his language. "Sienna Cross," he began, his voice warm despite speaking from beyond death. "When your people answered our call, I expected warriors. I did not expect to find someone who could teach me that the shape of a heart doesn't matter. You showed me that love exists in the space between different souls, in the choice to see beyond what divides us. The galaxy survives because humans and Averins learned to dance together. But I survived, truly lived, because I learned to dance with you. I don't regret my choice. I regret only that our dance was so brief. Thank you for teaching me that even dying stars can burn beautifully when they're not alone." The message ended, with his scales showing one final pattern, the Averan expression, "for eternal devotion." 6 months later, Sienna stood before a memorial on Averan Prime, surrounded by thousands of both species who had come to honor their dead. Beside her, Torren placed a marker bearing Rindal's name. Around them, humans and Averins mingled freely, their differences no longer barriers but bridges. "He's right, you know," Torren said quietly, "about dancing together. Rindal taught me that too. We were so busy being different species that we almost forgot we could be friends first." Sienna smiled through her tears. "They'd be proud of what we've built. Not just the Alliance, but everything. We didn't just save the galaxy. We proved it could be better." Vasquez joined them, her uniform adorned with both human and Averin decorations. "The Council wants to name you ambassador to the Averin worlds," she told Sienna. Seems appropriate, given you've already been doing the job. What about you? Sienna asked. Me? I'm going exploring, Torrin and a mixed crew. The galaxy's safe, but it's still mostly unknown. We're going to see what's out there, meet new species before they need saving. Vasquez's smile was genuine. Besides, someone needs to make sure humanity doesn't get too comfortable. We fight best when we're challenging ourselves. Above them, ships from 20 different species moved through Averin Prime's orbit, the new Galactic Alliance, forged in fire and sacrifice. Humanity had answered a desperate call for help and brought something the galaxy had never seen before: the refusal to give up, the courage to fight impossible odds, and the wisdom to know that strength came from unity, not isolation. The stars had screamed for help, and humanity had answered with retribution. But in the ashes of that righteous fury, they'd built something greater, a future where different species could stand together, dance together, and face whatever darkness the universe held with defiant hope. Sienna touched the memorial stone, feeling the cool surface under her fingers. Thank you. She whispered to the memory of an alien who had taught her that love knew no boundaries, that courage wore many faces, and that sometimes the greatest victory was simply choosing to fight for each other. In the sky above, a human corvette and an Averin cruiser flew in perfect formation, their pilots probably arguing about tactics while trusting each other with their lives. It was messy, imperfect, and absolutely beautiful. The galaxy had been saved. But more than that, it had been changed. And as the twin ships disappeared into the stars, Sienna knew that Kelthar and Rindal and all the others who had died had left behind a legacy far greater than victory. They'd left behind hope.